What a headshot! What a head!
How's it guys, this is Dayvy, FPL, and welcome back to the Fantasy Premier League video here on my channel. Now in this video, I'm going to take you guys through my ultimate guide to the upcoming Game Week 8. Now Game Week 8, as you know, is going to be a blank game week. Liverpool vs Chelsea has been postponed. We've also had the postponement of the United vs Leeds game, as well as the previously postponed Brighton vs Crystal Palace fixture. But don't worry, in this ultimate guide, I'll be taking you guys through all those talking points, including some other ones regarding the wildcard. So talking points covered in this specific ultimate guide are going to be the usual stats list / watch list. We're then going to move on to the wildcard debate, and what I've done is I've actually made a Game Week 9 wildcard for you guys that are debating between the Game Week 8 versus Game Week 9 wildcard. And then to wrap up the video, I'm going to talk about captaincy. Now as always, if you guys have any other talking points, drop them in the comments down below, or also ask me over my Discord server where I am generally a little bit more active. But this video might be a slightly longer one, so sit back, relax, and let's get straight into it. So the first talking point that I want to just cover is going to be about the European competition. So please, I know we've had some postponements, Game Week 7, no Premier League football, but the European games, most of them at least, are still going ahead. So that's going to be tonight. I'm recording this actually before the Spurs and Liverpool fixtures, so just keep that in mind when we do talk about the future talking points, as there might be some talking points coming from those games. But tomorrow we have Chelsea and Man City, then on Thursday we have the Conference League as well as the Europa League, where there are a couple of Premier League teams playing. So just keep that in mind when you are looking at players, especially if you are in a wildcard. Make sure that the players that you bring in are injury free, and also be nice to see if they were subbed early in those respective European games. I know for myself, I'm looking at someone like a Perisic. I'm also going to monitor Liverpool tonight. If Salah and Trent look good, I might actually include one of them on my wildcard draft for Game Week 8. So just a little bit of a reminder here to you guys to cover the European competitions. Now the first major talking point about this video is going to be our usual stats list / watch list. So if you guys don't know, I'm going to be covering kind of the teams and players, or at least in the previous ultimate guides I've covered the players, but in this specific kind of ultimate guide I'm only going to cover the teams. Now the reason for this is that since our last ultimate guide, the players generally on XG, non-penalty, and also XA haven't changed, whereas the teams for those wildcards I do believe are more important. So we're going to focus on the teams for XG non-penalty, then also XG conceded. Now if you guys do want kind of a player selection, go over to Fantasy Football Fix, as that's where I do get my stats. Go over to their Opta Stats sandbox, select whatever player your heart desires, whatever team your heart desires, then you're going to get all those stats available to you. So the first stat, as I mentioned, is going to be XG non-penalty. Now if you guys have watched a previous ultimate guide, I've actually changed this to non-penalty just because penalties are not super sustainable, and therefore I want to go on kind of XG non-penalty. Now you guys might like or not like XG, I personally do like it, and if you are watching this channel, you probably are a fan of it. Now the first 5 teams I want to cover are going to be the top 5 teams in terms of XG. So what this means is these teams you guys should be targeting, they have great attacking stats over the opening 6 game weeks, and therefore their attackers should be favored. Now the first team is going to be no surprise there, it's going to be Man City with an XG of 13.71 over the opening 6 games. Now the next 3 fixtures, Wolves away, United at home, and Southampton at home. On paper those fixtures might be a little bit tough, but this is Man City we're talking about, and they are a great attacking side. So if you're like me on a wildcard Game Week 8, you're going to be targeting a Kevin De Bruyne, probably have a Haaland already. So I think a double up is almost essential if you're not going to go with Salah. Now the next team coming up is going to be kind of a contradiction to the wildcard, because not a lot of us are going to own these Arsenal attackers. They have an XG of 12.24 over the opening 6 games. Brentford away, Spurs at home, and Liverpool at home. I think that's going to decrease the XG though, especially those last 2 fixtures. But this was quite interesting for me to see because I'm going without a Jesus in my wildcard, and that could actually come back to bite me with that high ownership. The third team to cover is going to be no surprise as well, Liverpool with 11.95, even though they haven't already got off to the best start this Premier League season. Now fixtures upcoming, Chelsea away, Brighton at home, and Arsenal away. Depending on how these games go, I do expect Liverpool's XG to slightly decrease from their average. So it's a little bit weird here. In the top 3 teams, I'm losing Arsenal assets, I'm losing Liverpool assets on my wildcard. What could go wrong? The next team might be a little bit of a surprise here. It's going to be Brentford with an XG of 10.67 over the opening 6 games. Arsenal at home, Bournemouth away, and Newcastle away. Definitely that Game Week 9 fixture against Bournemouth is going to be one to target if you guys are going to use the wildcard over the international break. So an Ivan Toney is almost essential in that wildcard draft, and unfortunately if you guys are going to wildcard this week, you might actually miss out on him. The next team though, you'll have multiple of their options in your wildcard for Game Week 8. It's going to be Newcastle with 9.82. Now I'm super happy to actually see that Newcastle are here, as I am a heavy favourite of Isaac in my wildcard draft, and with fixtures upcoming against Bournemouth at home, Fulham away, and Brentford at home, that kind of validates me including a triple up of their assets. So in terms of the top 5 teams, the top 3, no debates there. In terms of Brentford and Newcastle, if they do keep this up, they could be on for great FPL seasons, and their fixtures upcoming also look pretty decent. But as with everything good, you got to have the bad side. So now let's focus on the bottom 5 teams. And the reason I want to focus on these teams is that if your defenders are playing them, the chances of a clean sheet should be pretty good. Now the first team is going to be Bournemouth. A little bit surprising there, as I did see some attacking threat over the opening couple game weeks, but they only have an XG of 2.45. So you Newcastle owners, a double defense on a wild card looks pretty strong for game week 8. Newcastle away, Brentford at home, and then Leicester at home. I generally think the Newcastle defense is where we'll target our attention over those next 3. Coming up next is going to be Aston Villa. I've seen a lot of people include a Leon Bailey, maybe even looking at a Ollie Watkins. Their fixtures, however, are simply outstanding. Southampton at home, Leeds away, and then Nottingham Forest away are great on paper, and therefore I do expect their XG to improve at least over the next 3. Unfortunately though, with Aston Villa, quite hard to predict who's going to start for them, not playing the best brand of football under Stevie G at the moment. So therefore, even though they have great fixtures, it's a miss for me. Leicester though, with an XG of 4.87, a lot of us are including a Maddison, but I think if you look at those game week 9 and 10 fixtures, Nottingham Forest at home, Bournemouth away, you have to include some of them for those fixtures. West Ham up next. This kind of gets worse and worse. Leicester options on our wildcard, West Ham options on our wildcard. Both of them have low XGs, but maybe that can improve with these nice fixtures. So just under 5 XG for West Ham over these opening 6 games, but Everton away, Wolves at home, and Fulham at home, maybe they can improve on that. But I do think generally West Ham have been underperforming. I think any West Ham fans in the comment down below will probably agree with that. But with new signings like Paqueta, maybe they can improve from an attacking point of view. Then the final team, Nottingham Forest. However, I don't think many of us will consider their options. Maybe a Neco Williams, or maybe a cheap kind of forward or striker. But with just under 5 XG in the opening couple game weeks, Fulham at home, Leicester away, and Aston Villa at home, I do think they can improve on this, but I'm not really expecting too much from the newly promoted side. So as you guys can see from an XG non-penalty point of view, target the first kind of 5 teams I spoke about, then target the defenders facing the current 5 teams to hopefully get you some clean sheets. Talking about clean sheets, now let's focus on the defensive side of things. The first 5 teams are going to be the lowest XG conceded over the opening 6 game weeks. So these are defenders that you guys should target or bring in on your wildcard. Now the first team, like the attacking point of view, no surprises here. It's going to be Man City with 4.16 over the opening 6 game weeks. Now I will tell you guys, I'll kind of warn you, I did own a double up in that Man City defense for the opening 6 games, and there weren't that many clean sheets that came from them. But seeing the stats here make me a little bit disappointed, as it feels like the defense was underperforming, but maybe that can improve over the next 3. Really spoke about those fixtures, do still think that Man City are a quality team, and they can basically keep a clean sheet against anyone. Same can be said about the next team, Arsenal, 4.28, just a little bit more XG conceded than Man City, and the fixtures upcoming against Brentford away, Spurs at home, and Liverpool at home. I think that might slightly reduce, as those next 3 look quite tough from a defensive point of view. Added to that, the fact that Arsenal are playing a whole bunch of fixtures in October that might see a regression of that defense. Brighton up next, a team that seems to be a quick sell for this upcoming game week. As you guys can see, a blank in game week 8, even though that protest of the train lines was actually postponed. So the reason it was originally postponed isn't even happening anymore, but they couldn't reverse the fixture. But generally, I think that we probably would have lost these assets anyway. Liverpool away and then Spurs at home, they didn't look great defensively. Added to that, the fact that Graham Potter's just departed the club, how they're going to kind of set up defensively, how they're going to set up from a formation point of view, who kind of knows? But I do think that Brighton are on for a great season if they can stay consistent. The next team is going to be Spurs. If you guys are looking at a Perisic, that could be quite a nice option to look at. Leicester at home is a great fixture. However, the North London derby might be quite a high scoring one. And then Brighton away is also a little bit of a tough game. The final team though in the top 5 XG conceded, or the lowest XG conceded over the opening 6 game weeks, is actually going to be Wolves. At 6.36, this is quite a tough game to go for. Up next, Man City at home. Now will that put you off kind of captaining a Haaland? I don't think so. I think they're going to have quite a tough test, but then the next couple games, West Ham away and Chelsea away, they might be able to do quite well defensively in one of those games. Now this does worry me slightly, as I am looking at a Jared Bowen on my wildcard. With Wolves in game week 9, that might not be an optimal fixture. So yes, a surprise entry of Wolves. I didn't really expect them to be, but the top 4 teams pretty predictable, to be honest. Now going on to the bottom XG conceded side, so these sides have conceded the most XG over the opening 6 game weeks. So if your attackers are facing these teams, definitely play them or at least bring the options in. So the first team, Nottingham Forest, is going to be a target for me, especially in that first game. Andreas Pereira and Mitrovic could potentially start in my wildcard draft. Fulham at home, Leicester away, then Aston Villa at home. I definitely will look to include a Fulham and a Leicester attacker. Talking about Fulham, they're going to be the next team up here, which is a little bit of a surprise for me, but they are a newly promoted side. So the second worst XG in the Prem at the moment, Nottingham Forest away, Newcastle at home, and West Ham away. At least I will own Bowen and Isaac for these fixtures. The next team was a massive surprise to me. It's actually going to be Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace last season and this season have actually had good defensive performances, but the stats don't actually show that. So just under 11 XG conceded over the opening 6 game weeks, and with fixtures coming up of a blank, Chelsea at home, and then Leeds at home, that defensive form might actually continue. Next up is going to be Leicester, a team that I would be definitely targeting. We spoke about that Game Week 8 fixture against Spurs. A Harry Kane could even be a better captain than a Haaland this week. And on a wildcard, I definitely wouldn't own any of their defenders. And then the final team to kind of wrap up the newly promoted side is going to be Bournemouth. 10.4 XG conceded. They have Newcastle away. Great fixture for Isaac and those are kind of Newcastle attackers. We then have Brentford at home, Isaac Toney. Then Leicester at home, looking at a Jamie Vardy and Maddison or maybe even a Harvey Barnes. So definitely target these 5 teams. If you guys are going to be wildcarding this week or next week, kind of look at the fixtures that they have, target those attacks, as surely they'll return you some FPL points. But now going on to a big talking point about Game Week 8 is going to be the wildcard, and the reason I want to talk about this is, as mentioned in my wildcard draft yesterday, I didn't really go in super in depth as to why I was actually choosing Game Week 8 versus Game Week 9. So what I'm going to do in this ultimate guide, I'm going to give you some talking points, and I'm actually going to show you the reasoning behind that decision and what I actually did. So the first thing that you guys should be doing if you are kind of debating Game Week 8, Game Week 9, if you want a wildcard later on, 100% do that. I'm actually quite fond of a Game Week 12 wildcard if you guys want to look at that. But generally between Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 was where I was kind of debating my wildcard. So what I advise you to do is make a wildcard draft for Game Week 8, then make a wildcard draft for Game Week 9, and then compare the differences between those two drafts. If there's a lot of differences, maybe kind of 5 or 6 players, I'd consider saving the chip for Game Week 9, but if there aren't too many differences and you actually have a relatively the same team, then move it 1 game week forward to Game Week 8. Now yes, there's the debate about the international break. The injury news could be quite valuable. As they say, more time is equal to more information, and that is always valuable on FPL, but at the current state, my team only had 7 fit players. So unfortunately, because of the postponements, I was shifted forward. I don't really want to take a -4 or -8 going into Game Week 8, just a wildcard in Game Week 9. That didn't really make too much sense to me, so I was almost forced into moving it 1 game week forward. But the one major talking point to add to the kind of differences between the drafts is going to be what you think about Mo Salah. So if you guys do want Mo Salah, a Trent, the Liverpool assets in general, I would probably postpone it to Game Week 9, take them out for Game Week 8, maybe a -4 hit, bring a KDB, a Son in, and then on a wildcard in Game Week 9, you can keep Salah and Trent in your starting 11. I genuinely have seen in Game Week 8, not many people have gone for a Salah and also Trent. I think they're going to be future transfers in, but that could be 2 free transfers needed to make that switch. So I do think it comes down to the Liverpool assets. If you guys want to keep Salah next week for Game Week 9 and a Trent, I'd probably consider wildcarding rather next week. But otherwise, in general, there aren't too many kind of fixture swings happening between Game Week 8 and Game Week 9. We have the Leicester assets. We have Nottingham Forest next week. That could be a swing, but you can always bench those assets on your wildcard Game Week 8 draft. But do let me know if you guys have any questions about this kind of decision. If you guys are debating which game week to go, I can maybe help you out in the comments, or as I always say, on my Discord channel where I am slightly more active. So to kind of show you guys what I mean about making a Game Week 8 draft and making a Game Week 9 draft, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my current Game Week 9 draft because I made the Game Week 8 draft in yesterday's video. So go check that video out if you haven't seen it. Very good video in my opinion. I go over kind of the variations that you guys can also make on the kind of template that has currently been set out for the wildcard Game Week 8. So very quickly, 0.3 in the bank, bottom right hand side, so you guys should be able to afford this draft even if your team value is slightly less than me. Go on to the bench department. The first changes that you'll see is that Reece James is no longer on our bench. He'll be in our starting 11, and therefore Sufal at 4.4 can now become Fofana, as I do prefer him for the future game weeks. Otherwise, Ward, Andreas, and Emerson, all cheap budget enablers that I would include on your wildcard drafts. Heading onto the backline, this is going to be exactly the same as my Game Week 8 video. I've got Pope, Cancelo, Trippier, and Reece James all in here, but you guys can also go for a Trent if you want to. I just don't really like those upcoming games for Trent. I think that Brighton at home game will be fine, but after that, Man City and Arsenal aren't too optimal. Next up is our midfield department, which has actually had some shifts. I've included Mo Salah in here because I do think that Brighton game is good from an attacking point of view. Then I have Martinelli, he's a mainstay, but now I've combined kind of Maddison and Harvey Barnes, focusing on those next 2 fixtures in Game Week 9 against Nottingham Forest at home, and then Bournemouth away in Game Week 10. Now I know what you guys are thinking, I'm absolutely mental here, Harvey Barnes, what a differential, but don't worry, that money in the bank, that 0.3 in the bank will be used to upgrade Harvey Barnes to Zaha, probably in Game Week 10. Then heading onto our forward line, I've switched it up here. I've gone for Haaland and Mitrovic. Those two I think are essential any wildcard team for at least now till Game Week 16. But then I have switched up my third striker to Ivan Toney from Isaac from Newcastle. So I do really favour this Ivan Toney fixture. I think the Game Week 8 fixture against Bournemouth is really where you want those Newcastle assets. After that, the fixtures aren't too sensational, and that's why I think Ivan Toney with his reliability is slightly edging it for me. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take away the players that are exactly the same from my Game Week 8 draft to my Game Week 9 draft, and as you guys can see, I have 4 differences from that draft. Mo Salah is the obvious big one. I have KDB in my Game Week 8 draft. KDB versus Salah is an interesting debate. Don't you know over the next 2 or 3 if KDB will actually outperform him, but I've gone safety here and I want to show you guys a switch up which will include Mo Salah in Game Week 9. Then I obviously have Harvey Barnes targeting those next two fixtures. I've excluded Jared Bowen from this draft, but I do actually agree with it because I think Jared Bowen game week 8 against Everton is a relatively fine game. After that though, a little bit debatable, and I mean you can't look past those Leicester fixtures. Ivan Toney over Isaac's another one that you guys can also look at. Then finally for fun on the bench over Sufal, because I do like those Chelsea fixtures coming up. Now, in my opinion, these four kind of moves that are different from Game Week 8 to Game Week 9 weren't worth it, in my opinion, to move the wildcard from Game Week 8 to Game Week 9, and that's why I've shifted it one game week earlier. But as I mentioned, this really comes down to what your guys' team is currently set up on. As I mentioned, my team had 7 starters with Ward in goal. I wasn't super confident on that, and therefore the points I can get from Game Week 8 and Game Week 9 by wildcarding earlier, I do believe are worth more than these 4 moves. But you guys might have a different opinion, you guys might have a different team, so please just consider this. What I've done here is I've shown you an example of my own team and my own comparison, so do this yourself, and then you can always drop it in the comments down below if you need some help. Now going on to the final talking point of this ultimate guide for Game Week 8, it's going to be all about captaincy, Haaland. But in all seriousness, in terms of the Game Week 8 captain, yes, you could go for a Harry Kane, I'm 100% fine with that, but please be prepared to go against a massive effective ownership. I just think Haaland's a safe option to go for. You can 100% go for a Son or a Kane. You don't have to captain them. You could just get those differential points straight away, not doubled, as I just think that Haaland is a great asset against Wolves away. Man City always do kind of well against Wolves, even though Wolves usually defend quite resiliently against Man City. I just see that Man City attack being too strong, and De Bruyne and Haaland should probably combine, maybe even Phil Foden with that partnership he has with Haaland, and that's why you'll be my captain for Game Week 8. But I do understand if you guys want to go for a Harry Kane, I would go for Harry Kane over a Son. So if you guys do want to captain a Spurs asset, Harry Kane 100% over someone like a Son. So Maverick, Harry Kane, but safety is going to be Haaland, and Haaland might even be the better option than Kane, considering the fact that Kane's positioning has now made him not really the main talisman that he's always been. But let me know in the comments down below, you guys are captaining going into Game Week 8, but it's probably going to be Haaland. But this is basically wrap for the video, guys. Hope you did enjoy it. Please don't forget to like if you did and subscribe if you haven't subscribed yet. Tons of content still upcoming. Got the deadline stream on Friday and my final wildcard team selection coming up tomorrow. So make sure that those bell notifications are on, the Discord notifications are on, and you guys are following me over on Twitter. But I'm signing off. It's been Dayvy FPL, and I'm out. Cheers. Bye.